Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'll be sharing with you guys how I made this beautiful dress and this stylish collar. If it's something you are interested in, please keep on watching and let's get started with the video. So I'm actually going to be using a princess dart pattern for this dress, and I already have a video on how to draft a princess dart on my channel, and I'm just going to be dropping the link in my description box. So I don't want the video to be too long, but if you want to use a basic pattern, you can as well go ahead and use a basic pattern to draft it. It's also the same thing, almost the same thing. Sorry, it's almost the same thing. So I already drafted out the basic pattern. I was actually teaching someone, that's why you can see the basic pattern on the material already, but I'm going to be using the princess dart pattern for the dress. So I already drafted out the pattern on a pattern paper, and I'm just going to be dropping a link in my description box like I said earlier. So I'm just going to place it on my dress like this before cutting it out. So I'm just going to reduce this material because I noticed that it's too much for cutting out the princess dart. So I'm just going to reduce it a little bit, and I'll place my pattern paper and cut it out. And remember, your material is on the wrong side. Even when you are drafting, please make sure you are drafting on the wrong side. Sorry. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So as you can see, I've not cut out the neck for this dress. This is because of the type of design we are drafting for the dress. So the neck width I used is 4 inches. This is because of the style of the neck. So I just made a notch there so that when I'm cutting the style, it's not confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the cupped part of my princess dart bustier, and this is going to have 2 pieces. So I'm also going to fold my material into 2 like so before cutting it out. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So I'm also going to cut out the back the same way I did for the front. And this is the back of the princess dart. As you can see, this is the zipper allowance I let. So I'll just go ahead and place it on my material like this and also cut it out. So if you're using a basic pattern, remember to add your zipper allowance to it also. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So I'm done cutting the back. All I need to do right now is to divide it into 2 because of the zipper allowance that I left. So I'll just go ahead and divide it into 2. So right now, remember this is a dress, so I'll be cutting out the skirt pattern. And as you can see, I already drafted about 1 inch at the top of my material. And this 1 inch is going to serve as my waistline. So right now I'll be measuring my waist to my hip line, which is 9 inches. You can use either 8 or 9 inches. 9 inches to 8 inches is the basic allowance for your hip line, or you can just go ahead and measure on the person's body. So right now I'll use my ruler to connect like so. So right now I'll be marking the entire dress length. I remember I already marked my shoulder to my waistline, which is about 16 inches. So I'll be removing 16 inches before measuring my dress length. You can see where I placed my tape. So from that 16 inches, I'll be marking the dress length. So the entire length of the dress is 44 inches, but I'll be adding 2 inches allowance, which will make it 46 inches. The 2 inches is for the allowance of the dress, so that when I'm folding, it doesn't come out short. So I'll be marking 46 inches after removing my 16 inches at the top. So right now, I'll just go ahead and use my ruler to connect. So what I'll do next is to divide my waist measurement by 4, which is about 7.5, I'm not going to be adding a dart to this skirt. I will show you an easier way to draft it without adding a dart to it. So next thing I'll do is to add 1.5 for my sewing allowance. You can as well add 1 inch for your dart if you know you want to add a dart to it, but I won't be adding a dart to mine. So the next thing I'll do right now is to divide my hip circumference by 4, which is 40 divided by 4 is 10 inches. Then I'll add 1.5 inches also for my sewing allowance. At the hem of the skirt, I'll be removing 1.5 inches from my hip circumference, which will be 8.5. Then I'll add 1.5 inches for my sewing allowance. So right now, I use my ruler to connect from my hip to the hem of the skirt like so. That's my hip circumference to the hem of the skirt like so. Then I'll go ahead and use my hip curve to connect my waist to my hip line like so. My waist to my hip circumference like so. So remember I said I won't be using a dart for this skirt. So what I'll be doing right now is that I'll come down by 1 inch from here. Then I will simply use my curved ruler to connect that 1 inch like so. I'm just making a slight curve, that's all. And this is what we have. So we're done drafting the front part of the skirt. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. So right now I'll use the front pattern to cut out the back, and remember you're supposed to fold your material into 2 also. Then I'll be leaving about 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. You can see it. You can leave either 1 inch or 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance before cutting out. So I'll go ahead and cut it out the same way I cut out the front. So I already cut out my lining for each piece of my material, as you can see. So you can as well go ahead and cut out your lining also. So right now I'm going to be cutting out the asymmetric neckline for this, and I'll be cutting my lining together with it so it doesn't become difficult if I cut it separately. So I'll place my lining on my material like so, and I'll go ahead and use my pin to pin it down so it doesn't shift when I'm cutting it. So right now I'll just go ahead and use my pin to pin it down carefully. So you can see this line in the middle of my pattern, and that's the crease line. I'll just go ahead and use my ruler to draw the line. This will be a guide for me so that when I'm drafting the neckline it doesn't become difficult. So I'll just go ahead and use my chalk and ruler to draw the line like so. And please, I'm cutting at the front part of my material. This is the front, not the back, so that I'll know where my material my design is facing. That's why I'm cutting at the front. So if you're using a basic pattern also, you just go ahead and do the exact thing I'm doing right now. So from my neck width, remember I made a notch at my neck width, which is about 4 inches for the neck width. So I'll come down by about 6 to 7 inches depending on how low you want the neckline to be. So I used 6 inches, and from that 6 inches I'll come out by about 2 inches. So right now I'll just go ahead and use my ruler to connect to that 2 inches like so. Sorry, at this point I didn't know my camera wasn't recording, but what I did was from the other neckline I came down by about 7 inches. As you can see, I came down by 7 inches. Then from these 2 inches that I took, you can see these 2 inches, I used my ruler to connect it. Then I connected the other side where I made the notch. I connected it all the way to this 2 inches. I remember I used 6 inches at first when I was trying to draft out that 2 inches, but I added extra 1 inch to make it 7 inches since I used 7 inches on the other side as well. So please extend it to 7 inches, and if you want it to be 6 inches, you can also leave it at the 6 inches for both sides. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut it out carefully. There's no need to add any extra allowance to it. The allowance there is basically what will be used when you are trying to turn in with your lining. So this is what the neckline looks like. So at this point I'm about to draft the collar for the dress. That's the asymmetric collar. So what I'll do right now, I'll fold my material into 2 like so. Then I'll place my Ankara material on it like this. So I'll go ahead and pin it down so that it doesn't shoot when I'm drafting the collar. So I'll just carefully pin it down. So right now I'll trace out this neckline on my collar material like so. I'll just carefully trace it out exactly as it is. So once I get to the shoulder line, I'm going to mark 2 inches. This is how wide I want my collar to be. It's actually 2.5 inches including the sewing allowance. So the initial wideness is 2 inches, but I added half an inch, making it 2.5 inches. So I'll just go ahead and also trace that 2.5 inches I marked. I'll trace it out as well. Then I'll also do the same thing for the other side of the shoulder. I'll also mark 2.5 inches like so. So right now I'll go ahead and remove the pin so that we can draft out the neckline. So right now the same 2.5 inches I marked at the shoulder, I'll mark it all the way like so. I'll just mark 2.5 inches. Then when I get to this part of the collar, I will be marking about 4.5 inches to 5 inches depending on how long you want it to be. I'll be using 4.5 inches. So at this point I will use my ruler to connect from that neckline all the way to the 4.5 inches I marked, and I'll also connect this other side as well. At this other side, I'll be using 3 inches instead of 2.5 inches that I used on the other part. This is because this part is a little bit wider than the other side. So I'll mark 2 inches. Then when I get to this down part, I will be using 4.5 inches as well. So I'll mark my 4.5 inches. So I'll use my ruler to connect like so. And I'll also connect this part. So as you can see, the collar is ready. All you need to do now is to cut it out. So you're just going to cut it out the exact same way you traced it out. But be careful so you don't make any mistake. So this is what our collar looks like. As you can see, one part is larger than the other one. So be careful not to make any mistake when you are sewing or when you are drafting. So if I place it on my Ankara material, this is what it is going to look like. So just know the sides to place on your material so you don't get confused. So at this point, I'll go ahead and sew this collar together with about 1/4 of an inch. So I'll just carefully sew it together, right side on the right side before turning it. So the only part I'll be leaving out is the neckline part of this collar, since I'm going to be using my lining to turn it, and for me to be able to turn it to the other side, so I won't be sewing the neckline, but I'll be sewing the other parts. So once I'm done sewing, I'll go ahead and use my scissors to trim out the excess around the collar, so that when I'm turning, it doesn't come out looking bulgy. So I'll just trim out the excess allowance that is there. So after trimming it, I'll go ahead and flip it over to the other side like so. I'll flip both sides to the other side. I'll use my scissors to bring out the sharp edge at the collar. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other side, and I'll just go and give it a proper ironing, and I'll bring it back to my table. So this is what it looks like after ironing. You can see how neat it looks. So if I place it on my material like this, it's going to look like this. So I'll put the collar aside so that I can attach my material together before adding the collar. So right now I'll use my pin to hold down this princess dart of the dress. If you're not using a princess dart, you can go ahead and just attach the collar together. So I'll just use my pin to carefully hold down the princess dart part. So once that is done, I'll just go ahead and take it to my sewing machine and attach it together. So right now I'm done attaching the front pattern of my princess darts, and I'm just going to make a notch around it like so. So I'm just carefully going to make a notch. So once I'm done making a notch, I'll carefully open it up like so and take it to my ironing table and iron it properly. So this is what it looks like after ironing. You can decide to pad yours if you want to, but I'm not going to be padding this. So right now I also did the same thing for my lining, and for the lining I used a paper stay or an interfacing for it. So that's why it looks like this. And I also ironed it the same way I ironed the main fabric. So I did the same thing I did for the front of my fabric for the back. So right now I'm going to be sewing the upper part of this dress to the lower part, and I'll be sewing the fabric first together. I'm not going to be sewing the lining. So I'll use 1/2 inch to sew to join the fabrics together, and also do the same thing for the lining. So just watch closely. So after attaching the main pattern, I'll do the same thing for my lining, upper part to the lower part, using 1/2 inch to join them together. So after joining together, this is what the lining looks like, and this is what the main pattern looks like. I mean the main fabric looks like. So right now I'll go ahead and join both of them together. But before doing that, I'll go ahead and attach the back of my fabric also together the same way I did for the front. So I'll be attaching the upper part of it to the lower part as well. So once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and attach my lining to my main fabric and also the collar. So watch closely how I do this. So right now I'll just place my collar like so. Remember there are 2 sides of the collar, so make sure you place the correct one on each side. So I'll just place my collar on top like so. Then the next thing I'll do is to place the right side of my lining on the collar like so. Remember the right side of the main fabric is facing the right side of the lining, so make sure you place it on top properly. So I will use my pin to hold the collar, the main fabric and the lining together so that it doesn't shift when I'm sewing. So I'll carefully pin it down. So once I'm done with that, I'll just take it to my sewing machine and use about 1/4 inch to attach it together. So right now I'm done, and what I'll do right now is to make a notch around the neckline so that I can flip the lining to the other side and top stitch on it. So be careful when you're doing that. So right now I'll flip it over to the other side. Since this is like a straight collar, I don't have to make a notch all the way. I just made a notch in that middle part. So I'll just go ahead and top stitch on the right side of the lining. So once I'm done top stitching, I'll just go ahead and iron it properly. So this is what it looks like after ironing. You can see how neat it looks. So right now I'll go ahead and attach the lining for the back of my dress to the main material. So I'll attach it together like so. Just watch how I'm going to be doing it. So I'll use 1/4 inch to attach the neck together first. So once I'm done, I'll use my scissors to make a notch around it before top stitching. So once I'm done, I'll flip it over to the other side and top stitch on the lining like so. So once that is done, I'll just go ahead and iron it neatly. Then I'll flip it over to the other side like this. I'll just flip it over to the other side, right side facing the right side. Then I'll go ahead and attach like about 1/4 inch together. Remember this is the zipper allowance side of it, so I'm just going to be using 1/4 inch to attach the front and back piece together to make it look very neat. Once I'm done sewing on that, I'll flip it over to the other side like this. After flipping it over, I'll just go to my ironing table and iron it properly. So this is what it looks like after ironing it. You can see how neat the inside looks. So I did that for the both sides of the back piece. So right now I'll place both pieces together like so, and I'll go to my sewing machine and use about 1.5 inches. Remember, it's 1.5 inches that we left for the zipper allowance. So I'll just go ahead and use that same 1.5 inches to attach both of them together. So while doing that, I'll just go ahead and attach my zip to the dress using the same 1.5 inch I left for my zipper allowance. So this is what the back looks like after attaching the zip to it. So right now we are going to be joining the front piece and the back piece together. We're almost done with this video, and at this point, please, if you've not subscribed to my channel, please do. I really appreciate it. And if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to like it and also share it. You can also turn on the notification bells for my videos. Thank you. So to join both the front and back piece together, the first thing we'll be doing is to attach the shoulders together like so. So I'm just going to be using about 1/2 inch to attach the front and back shoulder together. So this is what it looks like after attaching the front and back shoulder together. And right now I'll flip it over to the other side so that I can use my body circumference to attach both the front and back together. So I'll just carefully arrange it like so. But before doing that, you can use your overlocker to weave the shoulder part. So after weaving the shoulder, I'll go ahead and use my pin to hold the front and back piece together, so that I'll take it to my sewing machine and use my body measurement to attach the front and back together. So once that is done, I'll be cutting out the sleeve. As you can see, I folded my material into two before drafting. So for the sleeve, I will first of all take about 3 inches from the top of my material like so. So I'll just take 3 inches across. If you know how to draft a basic sleeve, this should be very easy for you. So I'll take 3 inches. Then from that 3 inches I took, I'll use my free hand to connect like so. I'm just making a slight curve. And you know this is a puffy sleeve, so I'm going to be adding enough allowance to it. So from that, from the top of my material, I'll be marking the length of the sleeve, and the length of this sleeve is about 26 inches, including my sewing allowance. So the initial length is 23 inches, but I'll be adding about 2 inches to it. Okay, it's actually 25 inches, not 26 inches. So from top of my material, I'll just mark 25 inches, sorry, like so. Then I'll go ahead and use my ruler and chalk to connect. So I'll be cutting it out. Please remember I added about 10 inches extra from my normal sleeve measurement for the puffiness. So you can add as much as you want to for the puff to come out. So once I'm done cutting it out, I'll just put it aside. So right now I'll be cutting out the thigh of the sleeve, and I'll be using 3 inches for the height. That's for how high I want it to be. Then for the length, I'll be using about 30 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that 30 inches. Then I'll cut it out. Remember, you're cutting 2 for the left and the right hand. So once that is done, I'll go ahead and cut this sharp edge like so at the edge of the thigh. Then I will use 1/4 inch to sew it together. So right now, you're going to sew these 2 sides of the edge and leave the middle part out. Just watch what I'm doing. You just sew it like the sides of the edge and leave about 1/4 inch, so that when you're folding it does not become difficult. So just sew the 2 edges and leave the middle part out. So I'm done sewing, and I'll flip it over to the other side like this. So at this point, I'll use the edge of my scissors to bring out the tip like so, and I'll do the same thing at the other side as well. So once I'm done, I'm going to flip it over like so, and I'll be using 1/2 inch. I'll just use it to fold both sides like this. You can iron it before sewing if it's going to be easier for you that way. So you just fold it like this and go ahead and sew it together. So I actually went ahead to iron mine before folding it because I realized it's going to be easier for me that way. So after ironing, I'm just going to fold about 1/2 inch, and I'll go to my sewing machine and sew it together. So this is what it looks like after ironing. You can see how neat both of them look. So at this point, I'll take my sleeve and mark about 1 inch downwards. Then I'll mark about 1 inch also for the allowance at the side of the sleeve. So right here at this point, I'll be marking 5 inches upwards like so. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to start sewing from that 1 inches I came downwards up to the 5 inches I stopped at. So I'll be sewing up to that place. I won't sew all the way down and I won't sew all the way up. So after sewing it, this is what it will look like. And what I will do right now is that I will fold this part like this, and I will fold it again for about 1/4 inch, and I will do that on both sides. I'll go to my sewing machine and I'll run a stitch on it. Please remember, you're not attaching both of them together, you're just sewing the sides. So this is what it's going to look like after sewing it. So at this point, I'll fold about 1 inch or 1.5 inches inside like this. I'll just fold it like this. That's for the casing of the tie that we made at first. So I'll be using 1 inch or 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to run a stitch across like so. So after running a stitch on it, this is what it is going to look like. And right now I'm going to be inserting the tie inside using a safety pin. So I'm just going to use my safety pin to insert the tie on the inside. So I'll carefully insert the tie with my pin like so. So this is what it looks like after inserting the tie. I'm just going to flip it over to the right side, and you can see how beautiful it looks. So at the top of my sleeve, that's at the armhole, I'm going to run a gathered stitch across like so. So I just take it to my sewing machine and run a gathered stitch. And remember, I left about 1 inch, or I think 1 inch or 1/2 inch. So that's what I'm going to use. So right now I'm done, and I'll simply drag the stitch carefully so that it doesn't cut. So I'll just guard it in. I'll just drag it into a gathered form. So once that is done, I will just carefully arrange it on my dress like this, but I'll have to open this armhole part a little bit, maybe about 1 inch or 1/2 inch. So after opening it a little bit, I'll just go ahead and use the opened part of my sleeve. I'll just place it on top like so. Then I'll arrange it carefully and use my pin to hold it down. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my pin to hold it down while arranging the gathers on the dress. So please take your time while doing this so that when you're sewing, it doesn't come out short at any part. So just take your time while arranging it. So once I'm done with that, I'll just go to my sewing machine and I'll carefully attach the sleeve to the dress. So like I said, take your time while arranging and also take your time while sewing it. So I'm done attaching the sleeve to the dress, and you can see how beautiful it looks. All it needs right now is just ironing, and we are done with today's video. Please, if you enjoyed the video and you enjoy the content so far, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that yet. And I'll see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.